And I look at some of the players like Ken Fraser, Barry Davis, they never played in the seconds.
Yeah.
And to be in a class with those folks is something I hold very respectful.
Down, Thompson gets his hands to it, but it's down onto the ground. Birt takes it. Birt hotly pursued by Graham. Birt still in control, goes round on the left foot, snaps a goal, and it's through.
Well, 11 seasons spanning 1957 to 1967, 194 games, 303 goals, 3 best and fairest in 1961, 1965 and 1967. Certified Essendon legend John Birt, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for the invitation, Rowan.
Does it feel like a long time ago?
It certainly does, but sometimes you think, well, 55, 60 years ago or something, and then I think back to when I started playing, and guys like Jack Jones and Bill Hutchison, those blokes were only a generation before, only 10 years younger. And I'm thinking, the guys of my era, today's players, I'd be playing in the 19th century.
Yeah, yeah. In some ways, yeah, I know what you mean. It can seem like a long time ago.
No, it does.
Well, let's go back even further, right to the start. You grew up in Ballarat,
right.
A student at Ballarat College.
Yes.
Read a story about your introduction to Essendon. I think Dick Reynolds came and watched you play in a school game.
He did.
Tell us about that.
Well, I went to Ballarat College, and that was a Presbyterian school, and we hadn't beaten St Pat's College for 49 years. And this game was well publicised, and we had the great thrill of winning the game and winning the premiership. And everybody's excited. And as I came off the ground, this guy came up to him, middle-aged guy, and he said, "Oh, there's someone over at the gymnasium door that wants to speak to you." And as I'm getting closer and closer to the door, I'm thinking, that's Dick Reynolds. And I just couldn't believe that Dick was standing there, this handsome man, a man who'd always been everybody's idol. And then later years, or next day, I found out that the guy that came and asked me to go and speak to him was the Essendon chairman-selected Howard Oakey.
Oh, right, okay.
So Howard Oakey and Dick were at that game.
So what was the gist of the conversation? Was it, we're impressed with you, we want you to play for us? There are no zones then, obviously.
No, it was, and such impressive people. And in those days, well, it taught me a lesson when I got to work in recruiting in other clubs, that you send people who are well respected. And Dick and Howard said to me on that particular day that we'd like to come up and speak to your parents, because I was only 17 and I was in awe of these people. So Bill Hutchison, Dick Reynolds, Howard Oakey and Sidney Carman, who was the club treasurer, came to my house in Ballarat. And my parents just said, after they'd gone, "You're going to play with us."
But it wasn't that simple, was it? Because am I right in saying I think the Ballarat League refused to clear you for 2 years after? So it sounds pretty controversial. What was the background to that?
Well, I'd played under 16 football with Ballarat,
yeah.
And that tied me to the club. And the Ballarat Football Club promised me a clearance at the end of the first year. And that was okay, and then the Ballarat Football League refused my clearance. And Dick went to Ballarat to plead my case. And he got quite upset with the Ballarat Football League people, Bill Henderson, the president, and others. And he said, he's not going to learn anything by playing bush football. Headlines in the Ballarat Courier, Reynolds criticises bush football.
Yeah.
So Jeff Tunbridge and I, we both played together with Ballarat for those 2 years, and we both refused clearances. And I found out later on that the reason that they refused Jeff and I clearances for the second year was they were playing in the country championships, and it was very important that Ballarat win the country championships. But as it turned out, I only played 3 games that year because I had a crook shoulder. And so I had to stay the second year. But by the time I got to Essendon to play, I was 19 when I arrived, 20 when I played in the first game, but I'd played for virtually 2 years against men.
Yeah.
And I think that held me in great stead.
Well, you walked into a star-studded lineup, didn't you? And
Yeah.
you're a rover. It's obvious you're a rover.
Yeah.
But understudy to Bill Hutchison, I would have thought in terms of a football education, it doesn't get any better than that. Tell us about how great a player Hutchie was and what it was like to, I guess, learn roving craft underneath him.
Well, he was my hero, and I learned so much from Bill. And as the years went on, and he retired after that first year, and I was very grateful that I had his expertise with me in that first year I played. But he was always so wise, and he was coaching the reserves for a while, and then he was always on the committee or something. He never left Essendon. He'd been offered coaching jobs at Footscray, I believe, and other places, but no, he was such an Essendon person, and he was just fantastic. The only thing I was really happy with when he retired was that I was third rover to he and Stanley Booth. And I used to get a run on the ball at the time on period of each quarter. And I'd get 3 or 4 minutes, and then I was raring to go for the second quarter, and Hutchie had come back on the ball. So it was good to think that Hutchie retired, and I got a bit of a chance as first rover in '58.
Just on that, I mean, for younger fans who today see a collection of on-ballers and their roles are barely distinguishable, but I mean, back then, you know, there was a very clear definition, wasn't there, between being a rover and a second rover, or even a centreman or a ruck rover, wasn't there?
Oh, there certainly was. And we all had a role at the centre bouncers, for example. And like if I was roving to Jeff Leake, the role was that I'd be looking for where he was going to palm the ball. Huey Mitchell was a ruck rover, he'd be on the defensive side in case the opposition got hit out. And Jack Clark in the centre, well, he just sort of roamed around hoping to get a ball. But we all had a role, and particularly around the boundary throw-ins, everybody had a role there.
So if you were second rover, I figure you spent the bulk of your time, what, in a forward pocket, or how did that work?
Forward pocket, and we had this, well, it was supposed to confuse the opposition, that when Hutchie came off the ball, Stan Booth would go on, and I'd go to the half-forward flank, and hopefully the opposition would be working out whether I was playing half-forward flank or forward pocket. But, you know, for 20 minutes at least of each quarter, I played in the forward pocket. And that was in my first year, and I can recall on one occasion that I ran out to the opposite half-forward flank when I was in the forward pocket and got a kick because the ball wasn't coming anywhere near me. And I was playing on people like Bernie Smith, you know, outmark you every time the ball came in, John Beckwith. Anyway, I ran out the half-forward flank, got the ball, quite happy at getting a kick out in that opposite half-forward flank, kicked it back, and I think it was Freddie Gallagher, but one of the blokes that was playing full forward took a mark and kicked a goal. And I'm feeling really pleased about this. Quarter time, Dick comes up to me and he said, "Where are you playing?" I said, hopefully roving, half-forward, forward pocket. "What were you doing on the half-forward flank?" I said, "Well, I had to go and get a kick, Dick, try and get a kick." "No, you're in the forward pocket, you stay in the forward pocket." And no congratulations helping us kick a goal. Yeah. But that was the way it was played in those days.
That's like the story about Malcolm Blight kicking an impossible goal from the boundary and getting dragged by Rob Barassi because he didn't centre it. You know?
That's right.
Very, very distinct positions. And you mentioned Dick Reynolds as a coach. You were coached by arguably two of the biggest handful of names the game's seen, Reynolds and Coleman. What was that like in each case, being coached by those guys?
Well, they were completely different, but both legendary Essendon people, and the great history of Essendon, I really think has come from particularly those two, plus Hutchie. And it was just fantastic. Dick, I lived 2 doors from Dick, and he was like a friend, like a father, a friend. And he treated me like a son. And then when Coley came along, Coley thought that I'd been having it a bit easy under Dick, and he put me under a lot of pressure to do things that I hadn't been doing, but he made me a far better player. I don't want to skite about this, but in his 7 years I won the best and fairest 3 times.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was due to the fact that, okay, I went out there to play for Essendon, play for myself, hopefully play well, but also to show you, Coleman, I can do better than what you think I am. So that helped me a lot.
So he was a pretty hard coach, Coleman, was he?
Terribly hard.
Yeah.
And like getting back to what I said about Dick not praising you for kicking that goal, or helping kick a goal, but Coley was very much the same, because I wasn't a long kick and I liked short passing, and if I saw a leading forward or someone, well, I was ready to do it. And if I short passed and it was a failure, I'd get roasted. If I short passed, say to Teddy Fordham, and he kicked a goal, no, well done, John. It was, you just didn't short pass because Coley's instructions all the time were kick it long to Ken Fraser or kick it long to Teddy Fordham or Charlie Payne. Full-backs had to kick it long out to the ruckman. So it was all based on long kicking.
On a personal level, those 62 and 65 flags must have been enormously satisfying because you played in 2 losing grand finals in your first 3 years, didn't you?
Yeah, it was enormous. And to think that, you know, from 57 through to 62, we'd had a big turnover of players, and a lot of young players came in like Ken Fraser and Ron Evans and Barry Capuano and all those blokes, Billy Shelton, in 58, 59, and I think, and Barry Davis coming in 61. I think it was just right for Essendon to win a flag, but we lost 2 of our best players in that era just before John Coleman took over, in Reg Burgess, who was absolutely sensational, and the great Bobby Shearman. And if those 2 had been there, gosh, we'd have been almost unbeatable, I reckon, through the 60s.
The ball coming towards centre half forward. Cinnamon number 9 goes for it. Birt, however, chips in, picks it up. He's got a lead from Mitchell. It's over his head. In comes Neil, number 18, overruns the ball. Sampson knocks it cleverly to Birt. Birt's going to line it up, shoot for goal, and it looks all right to me. It's straight through. That's John Birt's first goal. There he is, number 11 for Essendon. A great little rover, this fellow. Has played a big part in the Don's success so far in the final series.
Well, you departed as well, didn't you, at the end of 67? I think you took on the job of playing coach of West Torrens. So tell us, what was the background there? Because you were 30, I think, about to turn 31?
Yeah. It was interesting because when Huey Mitchell and Jack Clark were dropped, it was about the 3rd or 4th round, I think.
Of 67.
67.
Yep.
And the ball went out of bounds down near the school. And I run in over to the boundary line to retrieve the ball, and some bloke's over the fence yelling out at me, "You're next, Bert, you're the only one left over 30. And that stayed in my mind, you know. Right. And even though I had a good year and I won the best and fairest that year, I still felt that it was time to go.
Yeah.
I remember one occasion we were playing Melbourne, I think, on the MCG, about halfway through the year, and went through a quarter and I didn't touch the ball, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is getting back to what it was like in 1957 in a couple of games. So, and I'd had a good offer from Torrens.
Yeah.
And it was the best thing I ever did.
So how did you find coaching at a senior level?
Well, I found it not easy, but it wasn't that hard because I was playing, and because I was able to run around and had very good people on the bench, chairman selectors and another guy. And I didn't find it that difficult, but I found it more difficult when I came back and coached in 71.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, the situation had changed a fair bit. Essendon had gone from being a perennial power to struggling, really struggling, hadn't they?
They had, and I was just doing a little bit of research the other day, and this is really not an excuse, but it is in a way, that in Jack Clark's last year in 1970 and my year in 71, we introduced 28 first-year players.
Wow.
Because Jack had realised, I think, at the end of 1969 that we needed to get a lot of young kids in, and the same thing was happening in 71. We started to get quite a few young blokes like Graham Schultz from the Wimmera, and it was a bit of a rebuilding couple of years. Tuddy came over, took over, did a marvellous job. But I felt that in 69, Jack's last year in 71, or 1970, Jack last year in 71, we really did introduce a lot of young blokes.
I just want to talk a bit more about your playing days, because we probably haven't done them enough justice here, but your playing weight was 68 kilograms. Like, that's pretty light. And playing on the ball, you know, a fair bit of physical stuff going on. How did you... And you were noted for your courage as well. I'm happy to sing your praises on that score.
Thank you.
How did you avoid getting the suitcase beaten out of you every week?
Well, Hutchie was a great inspiration for me, because he did say to me, and in those days the only way to pick up possessions was to get to every pack, because if the ball's kicked to Ken Fraser all the time, all they tried to do to Ken Fraser was spoil him. And if you're lucky enough to get to every pack that Ken competed in, there's a chance you're going to get the ball off the hands of the pack. So I think I was able to run a lot and just anticipate when the ball was coming off packs, because in those days we didn't have the ball kicked to us. As a small player, I can remember Barry Capuano at Essendon one day kicking the ball to me. And that's the only time I can remember having the ball kicked to me, because you had to run. And so it wasn't the scrums like there is today. I really struggled with that. But, you know, and I was watching a quarter of football that Glenn Jones was umpiring as the one umpire. And it was Essendon played St Kilda. And whenever there was a tackle, straight away there was either ball up, free kick to, or free kick against. None of the stuff that's going on.
You've just touched on my hobby horse. This is, like, we talk about congestion and stuff. You watch any football, even from the 80s, and it's remarkable how quickly they call for the ball up. And I don't know why they don't try that now.
Oh, no, it was always the way.
2002, you were voted number 21 in the 25 champions of Essendon. Now, we've talked about so many greats, not only of Essendon, but of the game generally. That must be you must be very proud of that honour, to be considered one of the best 25 players Essendon's ever produced.
Well, I'm very proud of that, but I don't think I'll be number 21 now after the great players we've seen since then. But it was a great thrill, and to think that, you know, one of the things that happened on that night, it was very emotional for me, was to see Dick up on the stage. And there was no doubt that he was going to get number one. But he's there, his family were next to me. The bloke I really felt sorry for, and this is no disrespect for Hurdy, was Hutchie, who was the number 3. And I was near Hutchie's family, and I could see the emotion drain out of them when he was number 4. But I just felt that of all the players that have ever played here, that he had to be in the top 3.
Do you consider yourself lucky to have played alongside some of the greatest names the game's seen, and then worked alongside, and even, you know, later generations of great players in various roles? I mean, you've really dealt with the absolute who's who of the football world.
Well, you mentioned the 2 coaches I had, but the 3 captains I had were Hutchie, Jack Clark and Ken Fraser. Like, you couldn't have 3 better captains.
No.
You know, they've all... Hutchie didn't captain a premiership team, but he was played in so many, but Clarkie and Ken Fraser.
Yeah.
But, you know, I've got great memories of some of the great people I've met in footy. And, you know, people like Don Scott.
Yeah.
Great friend.
Different sort of bloke, isn't
Different bloke, but a great friend, and you know that if ever you needed something, Don Scott would be the bloke you would talk to.
Yeah.
But, you know, so many of them. The Hawthorn people really stood out for me, like David Parkin. When I went there in 67, I couldn't believe that I didn't know so little about footy. In listening to David Parkin talk and listening to the Hawthorn people. And it's no surprise to me that today, the way football's played and the success that people are having in football have really stemmed from John Kennedy and Parkin and these people back in the 60s and 70s.
Very hard question to finish with, but do you have a single fondest memory out of the whole time in football, and if you do, why?
I suppose it's cliche to say that the 62 premiership was something very, very special, and particularly on a day in which I kicked 4 goals and kicked the first goal.
Yeah. And
that to me was a very, very special day. But I suppose from a selfish point of view, one thing that sticks, or a couple of things there. Firstly, I only played with 1 club. I had involvement with 7 clubs, only played with 1 club, which makes me very proud. And I never played in the seconds.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And I look at some of the players like Ken Fraser, Barry Davis, they never played in the seconds.
Yeah.
And to be in a class with those folks is something I hold very special.
And one of the most important parts of that, you've got a bit of a sleep in every Saturday morning.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, great memories and a fantastic career. Definitely one of the greatest players Essendon's ever produced. It's been a pleasure catching up with you, John.
Thanks very much, Rowan. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with John Birt. Unfortunately, far too much good stuff to put just on the video. If you want to hear the full version, head to the Essendon website.